All right. So you sit down to work on your business, not in it, but on it. And then 2 hours later, you end up with like a 14-page Google Doc, an entire AI chat thread, a color coded spreadsheet, or a new project management system that you've never used before. But when we reflect back, we haven't done a single thing that actually moves the needle. And a lot of the times, our brain convinces us that it's preparation, but it's actually procrastination. Let's call it procrastination with lipstick on it. And I wanted to break this down. And so I dedicated an entire episode on why over planning is actually fear in disguise. Most of the time, what we need is about 70% of the information to move and to make measurable progress. We need one clear question to ask and the 24-hour rule attached that I gave you in this episode that breaks the planning loop, breaks it for good, and gives us measurable progress. And so this is episode 711 of the Mind of George show. And if this one hits home for you, my one ask is that you share it with someone who needs to hear it. The best thing you can do for a fellow entrepreneur right now is put this in their ears, spread the love, and then you guys can hold each other accountable, but it also helps me and new people find the show. So without further ado, let's get into the show. I know you have been in the situation that I am about to describe because I don't think any of us are immune to it. But you take a minute, you sit down to work on your business, not in your business, but on it. And 2 hours later, you have a 14-page Google Doc, a color-coded spreadsheet, a new project management system that you've never used before, or if you're anything like me, a whiteboard full of ideas and strategies, but I actually haven't done a thing that moves the needle. None of us are immune to this. But what we get convinced of is that's preparation. We're preparing, we're running the course, we're thinking through it all. But what it actually is, it's just procrastination with lipstick on it. It's procrastination dressed up, convincing us that it's actually doing something. And this is a truth that I've had to learn and I still learn daily. But smart entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, the ones that get results, or not the ones that get results, but smart entrepreneurs, we tend to overthink ourselves into paralysis, right? We'll be like, oh yeah, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what we're doing is moving the starting line. So when we really internalize it and think through it logically, we overthink ourselves into paralysis or stagnation. But then actually less prepared entrepreneurs stumble into progress by accident. And so when we think about what's changing in the market, what's happening in business, how quickly and rapidly things are changing, the people pulling ahead in this current moment are not the ones with the best strategies. They are actually the ones that are messing up on the field and starting before they felt ready and adapted as they went. I'm on a statistics kick. 19% of businesses fail due to weak execution. Not bad ideas, not bad markets, not bad products, not a lack of customers, execution. The plan is not the problem. The plan is often the escape from the problem. And I remember Gary Vee said this years ago, and I got to give him full credit. He said, ideas are poop because execution is everything. And I think a lot of us as entrepreneurs can remember our first month in entrepreneurship, like not when we were planning it, but when we actually started. We're like, you know what? Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's adjust this. Let's go. And somewhere along the way, we lose that muscle of not overthinking and not overcomplicating. And so we end up over planning. And there is a real cost to over planning because planning feels productive. In every way possible, it feels productive. It scratches the same itch in our brains with dopamine and serotonin, and I'm not a brain scientist, but whatever those chemicals are, as actually doing a task. Because our brain gets a little dopamine hit from organizing things, color coding things, cleaning up our desktops, creating a strategy, but none of it actually moves a customer closer to saying yes. None of it moves the needle. None of it closes a deal. None of it records a podcast. Jeff Bezos said this. I have it written down in front of me. He said, most decisions should probably be made with around 70% of the information you wish you had. I'm going to say that again. most decisions should probably be made with around 70% of the information that you wish you had. Not 100%, not when you feel ready. As my friend Angie Lee says, ready is a lie, 70%. But what happens as entrepreneurs is we get stuck waiting until we've consumed everything, mapped everything, and planned for every scenario. And by then, the moment has passed, or our fear has grown and it feels significantly harder to stop. And so when we find ourselves in the spiraling of over planning or inundating ourselves with so much of it, like we have to understand what it actually is. It's not us being thorough. It's not us planning for every scenario. It's usually some fear that we have that is dressed up as us doing our due diligence. And so an easy way to remember this, and when I wrote this, it paused me in my tracks. A perfect plan you never execute is just a very expensive journal entry. A perfect plan you never execute is just a very expensive journal entry. And so if we understand the true cost of over planning, which is delay, distraction, somebody beats us, we don't get to iterate because we're waiting for the 100% instead of acting on the 70%, we have to understand the other side of that is why taking concrete, like simple concrete actions win every single time. So what's a concrete action? It's a small, specific action that you can follow, that you can learn from, that you can test with. And it boils it down into a feedback loop that strategies don't. There's 3 things that small concrete actions give you that strategies do not. Number 1 is they create feedback. Number 2 is they create momentum. And number 3, I'm holding up 4 fingers. Number 3 is they create clarity. So when we think about these small concrete actions, we get in a feedback loop, right? We can't learn anything about a plan. We can actually only learn from what happens when we do the thing. Because every action we take generates real data, whether we like the data or not. But we can clearly see, like, this part worked, this part didn't work, and this is how my audience responded. The way I outlined this podcast, everyone said they loved this part, they didn't love this part, but I got a lot of messages to this part. But if all I did was have the strategy on paper, I would never have that feedback loop. So no strategy, no plan on my whiteboard, no Google Doc can actually give me the feedback loop that is the real data that I need. The second thing small, simple, concrete actions do is they create momentum. And momentum is not something that we build up to, right? It's actually something that we build by moving. We had one hard conversation. We sent 2 emails. We made one offer. We pitched a sales call. Whatever that action was, especially from the last episode, after we're doing an energy and a capacity audit, one of those, like, I have to move in the first bucket. One of those creates momentum. And so the actual motion of us taking this small, simple, concrete action is what creates the energy, or what we would call momentum, for the next motion. It kind of stacks over and over. I think about it as it's almost like me tricking myself into action. And then the third one that it creates is clarity. Because the false belief that exists rampant in entrepreneurship is that we need clarity before we act, when in actuality, it's the opposite. 9 out of 10 times, I would say, and that's a statistic I'm making up, but at least for my case, that's what it is. Clarity is almost always something that comes after we take action. It's not a prerequisite. It doesn't come until after we take action. I do something and I'm like, wow, that worked way better than I thought. I never thought about that. Go. I do something. I'm like, that didn't land. What did I learn in the process? Oh, what not to do, which means I can try these things. The clarity always comes as a byproduct of taking the action. And an easy way to think about this is that we can't think our way into clarity. We act our way into it. And so the way that I created this to be a really simple framework is a 24-hour rule. And so I want to give you the framework. And this really builds on top of last Monday's episode about our capacity audit and those buckets. But this is the rule. Anytime you find yourself building an elaborate strategy, right? Like I'm over planning, I'm over researching, I'm consuming, I'm documenting all this evidence, I'm making sure I've turned over every single rock. You get to ask one question, just one question. What is the one thing that I could do in the next 24 hours that would give me a piece of data to tell me if this is worth pursuing? Not the whole plan, not the full launch, just the first mile marker. What's one thing? Is it one conversation to run it by a client? Is it one post on social? Is it sending one DM to somebody? Is it reaching out to somebody and making one new offer? But it's one test that you can commit to in the next 24 hours to expose that clarity, to get that feedback loop, to build the momentum, and to create the clarity on what the next step should be. Because by committing to something in the next 24 hours, it's helping us do a lot of things. The first thing is it's breaking that planning loop. I am notorious for this, but my planning isn't me with a piece of paper and a Google Doc. My planning is me verbally processing to people around me, thinking that if I speak it out loud to them, even though they don't work for me or I haven't asked them to do it, that it's going to magically do itself. That's mine. I'm just going to own it all day. I'm a verbal processor. I'm like, yeah, we could do this and it'll be this and I'll organize this way and boom, boom, boom. They're like, yeah, totally. And then 3 months later, I'm in the same bucket because my planning loop is verbally processing. So by committing to simple, concrete actions, it actually breaks that planning loop, whatever that planning loop is for you. The second thing is it gets us actual data-driven information faster. Sometimes I have an idea for a podcast, even this one, and I call two friends. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about recording an episode on this. Like, what do you think? Does it land? This is what I'm thinking. Here's the framework I made. And they're like, no. And I'm like, I'm glad I didn't record it. Like, what would you do to make it better? They're like, have you thought about this? And I was like, oh my God, that's such a good piece of information. That helps me a ton. So it gets us information faster. And then third, it's a filter. It separates our ideas that are worth pursuing from the ones that only sound good on a piece of paper or on a whiteboard or in a Google Doc. And so when we can actually commit to a simple concrete action and we do it in the next 24 hours, it's an indicator. And it's a really big indicator of like, I should pursue this more. This led to information. This idea fell flat so I can iterate it, but we have to take the action in order to do it. And so I was diving deep into this because in my brain, I have atomic habits going on. I have Mike McCalvert's Queen Bee Roll. I have the capacity episode that we recorded. And I was just thinking about how our human brains operate. And I know for me, how much dopamine I get speaking out loud of what I'm planning on doing, which is like me telling you how I'm going to have a 6-pack, but all I ever do is talk about going to the gym and talk about changing my eating habits. And so I found a piece of research about expert investors. And they found that expert investors are barely better, like marginally better than chance at predicting winners in advance. So without putting something in, without learning, they're basically no different than you and I investing a giant amount of money. Because in the investing bucket, when these expert investors were thinking about it, the product market fit only actually becomes clear through contact with the market, right? You can watch Shark Tank. You see how much more hungry the sharks are to make a deal when a product's already been in the market with a feedback loop than when it's pre-market. Because you don't really know. You can have the best idea, the best product, but until it touches the market or it touches the audience, you're really operating on a hypothesis and there's no data to back it up. And it's the same with our decisions. And so when we end up over planning beyond a reasonable window, meaning like we're still planning the same thing, we're still talking about it, nothing has changed, nothing has been tested. For us as an entrepreneur, it's just an indicator for us. there's typically something underneath it. We're afraid of it. We're afraid of rejection. We don't think it's going to land, but it's actually not an indicator that we prepared any better. It's really an indicator that we're avoiding something that's on the other side of it. And so what we have to start playing with is the reality of this and the truth around this, and asking ourselves better questions. Because the question isn't like, is my plan good enough? Or have I prepared enough? The other question is more powerful, which is, what's the smallest thing I can do today to find out if this is real? What's the smallest thing I can do today to see if this is an idea worth pursuing? What's the smallest thing I can do today to validate this and learn something? What's the smallest thing I can do today to create momentum, to create clarity, and to get that feedback loop? And so I want to actually just give you this right now. And you can do this anywhere, even if you're driving. I just need your thoughts. You can write it out if you want as well. But in this moment, I want you to think of one thing that you've been planning but haven't executed. Just one thing. Right? For me, it was shifting my workouts because I don't have the desire to go to the gym anymore, but I've been talking about it for 4 months and I've done nothing. Right? What's one thing that you've been planning? Maybe you've been planning to organize your brain better on your computer with Notion. Maybe you've been planning to change how you record your podcast. Maybe you've been planning to change deliverables and how you give them to your clients. I want you in this moment just to have one thing in your mind, one thing, and you already know what it is. And now I want you to answer this honestly with yourself. What is the smallest action that you could take in the next 24 hours? Not the launch, not the campaign, not rebuilding your entire computer, not burning down your podcast. What is the one action that you could take in the next 24 hours? The one move that you could make. And I want you to write it down. If you're driving, audio text it to yourself, because that's your homework. Because the moment you're listening to this, it might be 2:42 p.m. when I'm recording it. It might be 9 p.m. I just want you to write it down because that's your homework. Our job is to identify what those things are to collapse the gap so that we can take these small concrete actions that allow us the clarity that we're actually looking for. And the reason I always like to reminisce as an early entrepreneur, when I started as an entrepreneur in 2009, right? The only thing we had was Facebook, and it was for people with college emails. And I started as a food blogger, and I had an idea one day of sharing recipes, and I didn't have a website. So Facebook had this thing called the notes section. And so I would make a recipe and then I would fill out a note on Facebook and I would publish it to a page and then I would share those notes. Those notes got me hundreds of thousands of people, but then people stopped reading them. And I was like, maybe I should start a blog. And I transferred all the notes over. And I went through this so much. But when I was starting out, I was like, this is just what the game is. I have to figure it out. Right? The market changed. They're not responding to it. Let me try again. Or even email marketing or this podcast 700 episodes in. There was this love and this desire and this comfort to change of like, oh, got to try something. But it was always testing it on the market. It's almost like a restaurant who will run a special and it's limited time or it's only on the board once a week. And then eventually when everybody orders it and they keep ordering it, they add it to the menu, but then they replace it with a new special to check it. Right? There was this love for the process before I got the bias that like, oh, everything works. Or if I just over plan, right? Which is what slows companies down. It's the number one thing I help with when I'm coaching people is really our biggest sign of success is how frequently we can test and how quickly we can integrate the learnings from that test to make an adjustment to the market. And so here's what I want to leave you with. The world in which we are doing business doesn't reward us for having the best strategy. The rewards come to the person who stays in motion, adjusts in real time, and builds trust with our people, right? And how do we build trust? We're consistent, we're honest, and we communicate what we're actually executing. Because we can have unlimited, elaborate strategies in our head. We can have unlimited ones. But at the end of the day, the simple, concrete actions are the ones that allow us to influence our customers' experience or even ours or our team's experience. And at the end of the day, the more we can test, the more we can adjust, the more we can audit, the more we can have that feedback loop, the clearer we will be. But the more interaction we have with our customers, and they are really the only ones who decide if we win. And I have seen way too many companies think that they've made the best product, they have the best process, and then it falls flat on their face because they're not doing this. You can make the best plan in a boardroom with the best investment. But if you don't follow this, if you don't take simple, concrete actions, if you don't execute, you don't create that feedback loop, you don't unlock the data that comes in, you won't find the clarity. And then you end up building for yourself and nobody can consume it. And so the things that we have to be really, really aware of is we have to stop over planning to start. And we have to actually start with the clarity that we're having, take action on the clarity that we're having. And that clarity and action is what informs our plan. So we have a direction and we have an idea. We have 24 hours to test it. Make one phone call, make one offer, record one new episode in a way, try 3 new pieces of content you've never tried before, record a reel for the first time. Before you go make me a reel strategy for the next 90 days on Instagram, why don't you record 3 test reels and post it and see what the market says, see how it lands, and then use that as a piece of adjustment. So the way that we win this game, to adjust quickly, to move fast, and to stay agile, is to be committed to simple, concrete, measurable actions and not get lost in the over planning of the elaborate strategies. And it starts by being aware. If you find yourself deep in a Google Doc or 3 weeks into a plan, it's literally an immediate invitation to break check yourself and be like, okay, got it. George said this. I have to earn the right to finish this plan. So what's the one thing I can do in the next 24 hours to get a piece of clarity? What's the one message? What's the one offer? Call a friend, run it by them, pressure test it, call a previous client, offer them something new, record a new podcast, start organizing something different, but actually start shipping it. The only way that you can eat dinner is if you put a recipe in the oven. But if all you do is collect ingredients and stare at your kitchen equipment and then add more ingredients and wonder if and wonder what, 3 hours later you're hungry and dinner was never made. And so the only way to win is to keep putting recipes in the oven. But once you get a recipe out and you get a brownie and you're like, that's disgusting, and you realize that you use salt instead of sugar, you now know how to make the brownies the right way. Oops, let's use sugar, and then you have delicious brownies. And then you want them gooier, so you take them out of the oven 2 minutes earlier. And then you want them thicker, so you change the pan and the baking time, and you learn through the process. And it's no different for us as entrepreneurs, and that's the process that we have to fall in love with. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I promise you that simple, concrete actions will always win over elaborate planning. They allow us to stay agile. They allow us to learn. They create a feedback loop where it matters. They create momentum because we're stacking them. And then it gives us access to data to adjust that plan to keep moving forward. And so that's what I had today. So I want to share that with you. And this stacks really well with the last solo episode I did, which was on capacity math, putting it in one of the 3 M buckets: must move, must maintain, and must release. And so if you tie these together, it's a playbook that we get to execute daily. This isn't something we think about once, like this is how we should be running our days, constantly testing, constantly adjusting, and constantly protecting that motion. So I will either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we done for today.